What's good, everybody? Steve Discourse. I just wanted to cut in this week with an extra episode. We want to revisit some conversations we had about education earlier this year. And if you haven't seen this on your radar, Chicago school teachers are in the middle of a strike right now, negotiating for a new contract. And I think these conversations are important to come back to, because what is at the root of the strike in the Chicago Teachers Union is they are understanding that there is a lot of issues that their students are struggling with outside of just sitting in a classroom and learning the content. The failure or success of these students is wrapped up in more than just, can the teachers effectively teach that content? And I think it's a really brave, it's a bold move for them to be putting their whole livelihood, their paychecks on the line to say, we cannot agree to go back to work unless a lot of these other issues outside of the direct classroom are not addressed. We need funding, we need staff for nurses, psychologists, all types of people in the building that aren't actually teaching in front of the chalkboard. And so I wanted to revisit this because teaching and education in this country is a super complicated issue. And we've had some great guests on in the past who really helped us understand this in a much deeper way. So take a listen to these, and we'll be back next week with a new episode, of course.
What's the deal?
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 Yo, what's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
Hey, what's the deal?
What's good, everybody? I'm Steve Discourse.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Jay Callie.
Back from our break. What's the deal? This is the deal. We got Brandon Fry. He is a DC native. He's a middle school math and computer science teacher. We wanted to bring him on, following up our last conversation with Anthony Tillman, and really following up on all the kind of educational topics we've talked about on this show, because we realized they need like a deeper, we need to kind of dive a little bit more deeper. Maybe welcome to the podcast. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, we got to remind everybody, Jay Callie is our resident education expert.
That's
because
right.
she is
Better
as
say
well a teacher. She is elementary teacher, right? So today we want to kind of focus on the teacher's perspective from in the classroom. In addition to teaching and just kind of keeping the kids in line, Brandon, what do you have to do on a daily basis?
Well, just the beginning of the day, my day starts off with me being a nutritionist first. In Ward 8, it's a food desert, as we all know. So the students come to school and they're eating chips and they're drinking sugared drinks. And, you know, all those things don't set you up for success throughout the school day. So I try to bring fruit, granola bars, any kind of thing to kind of stimulate them so that they can have a positive effect on their learning. And then just dealing with that. You have to be a social worker in a lot of instances. In Ward 8, we all know that is the lowest socioeconomic ward in Washington, D.C. So there are issues that go on that affect student learning, but it goes on outside of the classroom. For example, I had a student whose father was murdered in front of the school, which it was very triggering for him to always be there, and there were no systems of support for him when he would have a moment. You know, he was 12 years old. His mom is my age. I'm 26. And he had to essentially become the man of the house. And that's something that isn't built into the curriculum. That's something that you kind of have to hone in on and get to know the person first,
Right.
And meet them where they are and try to see where it is that you can help them out so that they can ultimately be successful. And then, you know, you switch hats. Sometimes you're the big brother. Sometimes you're the loving father figure, in my case, being a male. And these are things that aren't taught in college. You know, these are things that aren't taught in the curriculum. They're not in the lesson plan. You know, these are things that you have to have as a human being when you're teaching younger people.
Jay Callie, how much of that sounds familiar to you, and do you have any other perspectives and roles you want to add into that?
Yeah, it all sounds familiar to me. I also teach in Ward 8, so a lot of his experience kind of mirrors the experiences that I've had. I haven't always been an educator in Ward 8. For the past 5 years, I taught in Northeast Washington, D.C. This is my first year teaching down in Anacostia, and it is shocking to see the difference, because going into education in DC, I was like, okay, it's Washington, DC, it's impoverished children, you know what I mean? It's kids who are of low socioeconomic statuses, but yes, the Anacostia area does suffer a little bit more than the rest of the city, and the difference is noticeable. Having to go in and get to know kids first. You want to go in and say, all right, let's get to know these standards. Let's break down the content. Let's dive into the curriculum.
Let's teach.
But let's teach. But realistically, you can't expect to just dump all this information into the mind of a child who's struggling to eat, who's starving, whose parents are being killed outside the school. None of my students' parents have been, killed outside the schools, but I have had instances where parents were fighting right outside the school, in the middle of the school day, during drop-off and pickup. That's traumatizing to kids. Like, I can't go to a space and feel safe where kids are fighting, parents are fighting, in some instances, teachers are fighting. You know what I'm saying? Realistically, that's what's happening in some of these areas. So you have to get over the burden and the hurdles of just life before you can even get into curriculum. I don't care. Your brain physically cannot learn when you're under pressure, when you're under stress. It doesn't fire the signals that it needs to lock in the information. You can't process it. It's not possible.
And then when you think about the sheer, just on a human level, he was 12 years old, and me at 12, I couldn't fathom going through life, dad's been murdered, and essentially I have to be the man of the house. I have 3 other younger siblings that I can't be a regular 12-year-old. I can't hang out with my friends after school. I can't go to the store or go play basketball because I have to make sure that they get home, that they're fed, while my mom is working overnight shifts, and then she comes home and she's dead tired. So, I just think that in education, especially in urban education, that you have to first lead with compassion, first and foremost, and understanding.
Yes. You know what? Something that we do at the school that I teach at, because I can say my school acknowledges that you have to get to know the person first. So with some of the kids who struggle, the teachers have a schedule, a rotation where we go and we call it banking time, and we just go grab that kid out of the classroom. Let's just take a walk. Let's have a conversation. What's going on? How is your school day going? What's going on at home? How are you feeling? Did you eat today? And we're just... The purpose is relationship building, because we acknowledge that I can't teach you if I don't know you. I can't teach you if you don't trust me, or if you think the only thing I care about is your test score. I care about you as a person first and foremost. So that's one of the things that we try to do to combat it. And, we recognize that it's small, but it can have a big impact of how they perceive school and how they perceive us as people who they spend 9 hours or more of their day with. So, that relationship is so crucial to being able to teach, especially I teach in an elementary school, small children.
Right.
I appreciate that idea of understanding that you have to kind of cater to the full child, but but that's a whole nother level of training and sensitivity and experience that you guys, as you said, aren't prepared for in the training and in college when you're getting your certifications and everything, right? So that's a lot.
And that's what's happening in front of kids. That's what's happening during the school day. A lot of people, if you're not a teacher, you really have no idea of what goes on those professional development days or on those after-school meetings. Talk about being a social worker or being a nutritionist, but also talk about having to be a fully trained data analyst.
Yeah.
We are diving into numbers as if we went to school and studied STEM. I feel like an engineer sometimes. Whoa.
And my major in college was biomechanics. And sometimes when we are there in those professional developments, I think that's something that should really be restructured. And it should cater to what's going on in the school at the time. When you have so many things, like you said, parents fighting outside of the school, parents coming up to the school to fight students in some regards, you have brawls breaking out.
Yes.
I think that that professional development should cater to more so to how to keep the school better than, hey, let's look at this data, or, hey, let's talk about park scores, or do you have all your grades in? Things that are not necessarily relevant to the overall culture of the school, which if that is positive, it can reinforce student learning.
So stepping back a little bit from, because that was a lot. All of this trauma and lack of support, maybe is a good way to also put it, that adds these hats and roles that you have to put on. But stepping back from that a little bit, just in classroom management specifically, are there anything, what kind of challenges do you face in just helping the kids get to the content and making them understand that?
I think it starts with the culture that you set. So me, at my school, they call me Joe Clark sometimes.
Okay.
Like, I'm a nice guy, but, when it comes to my students, I believe that it was an old proverb that one of my teachers told me, if you treat someone as they are, they will remain as they are. If you treat them as what they could or should be, then they will ascend to that level. In my classroom, I like to have signs up, just like positive affirmations of, when you step into this classroom, I expect nothing but your best and excellence. And if you can give me your best, then we can work on that. But I tell my students all the time, I can't teach effort. You have to be able to meet me halfway, but also have to be able to meet you where you are as well. Story, last year when I taught 6th grade, I had a student come to me on a 1st grade math level. And how he was able to get passed through is another story.
Right.
But when he left me, he was on a 5th grade math level, which he wasn't on grade level, but that growth was what I cherished the most, because he was really struggling, and he would break down and cry in class, and just had to have that positive affirmation, motivate him and say, it's not that you can't do it, you just have to be willing, you just have to have the effort. That's it. And you have to have a stimulus to motivate you, and that comes from the teacher.
I was about to say that the kid has to be motivated, like they have to want it, but the person who's in front of them making them want it is crucial. Yeah.
And so how do you deal with disruptions and problem behavior in the classroom? Knowing what you know about some of the outside issues that are going on behind the child's,
So for me, if I ever have big disruptions in my classroom, I like to have conversations with that student. And it just simply starts with, what's going on? And that's it. Talk to me, because I teach 8th grade, which is a bit different than elementary school, where they can actually, in a lot of cases, verbalize what it is that's actually wrong with them. And, sometimes, they don't have the emotional intelligence or emotional stability, and that's understandable. I think me at 13, I don't think I had it either without all the trauma that they deal with. So I kind of try to, lean forward with understanding and compassion first, before I don't get into screaming matches. It's not something where I'm a dictator and you're there and you have to listen to me because I'm an adult. At the end of the day, we're both human beings. And on a humanistic level, I want to see what's wrong with you first. And then we can, talk to whoever we need to talk to, or find a viable solution. And if that solution is, something happened at home, you didn't eat, or you got into it with your mom, or anything can happen. And by you telling me, now we know where to go and the process and the route to take.
Okay. And Jay Calley, for do you have a follow up for him, or I was going to ask you about younger kids, but
I mean, it's both. You'll be surprised how well a 2nd grader is able to articulate what's going on with them. Like, when they're freaking out, they don't know how to express it, but they typically know exactly what's wrong. So, like, I have a similar approach to you. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're tripping, oh, you need to do that. I'm going to be like, are you okay? Sometimes it's a double, sometimes it is a backhanded comment that I'm making, like, are you okay? But I also mean it, like, are you okay? What's going on? And they might say, can I talk to you about something? And they'll say, this morning on my way to school, my mom, we had an argument, and I was really upset. And then when I got here, this kid said that, and now I'm just frustrated. And, like, they can articulate why they're on the edge. And I'm like, okay, so what can we do to make this better? There are, of course, those moments when the behavior is extreme and a consequence has to be issued. Yeah. Like, just because you told me what's wrong doesn't mean you're not still going to get in trouble. Like, you're not going to hit anybody. You're not going to throw a chair in my classroom and not be in trouble. But I do care about why you did it. So let's fix the root of the problem. You're going to serve this consequence because you need to know it's not acceptable in my classroom. And then we're going to move on. You're going to learn.
And that's a life skill.
Yeah.
But so it helps to explain to them why, not just hit them with the stick and say that was not wrong, that was not the right thing to do. But so you're saying it helps to explain, because they'll understand that better.
It helps to explain to them why, but it also helps to just listen to them. Like, why would you do that? Because they're not doing it because they're mad or because they're mean or because they're bad kids. It's always something.
Right.
It's always something. These are children. We can't forget that these are kids that we're talking about. I want to know why you did it first, and now let's figure out what's moving forward, what's about to happen. Yeah. You're going to understand why you're not going to do that again.
And then when you think about it, it's like, if they're so used to someone just coming at them in a certain way, berating them, badgering them, screaming at them, and you just simply say, what's wrong? a lot of instances that just throws them off. They're like, oh, like they really want to know what's wrong with me. They're not screaming at me. Maybe I should talk to them. So I think that helps out a lot in the classroom.
What kind of institutional and policy things are on your mind? Obstacles, challenges?
I do think that there needs to be more social workers. I don't think these are the exact numbers, but I think there's like one for every 257 students in DC, which when you see the socioeconomic issues that go on here and the trauma that they deal with, that is just not a conducive ratio. The numbers just don't add up with that one. I also think that more people that make the decisions need to be people from the classroom. If you look at the State Board of Education in DC, I believe there are only like 3 of them that were actual teachers. And, they're making these decisions, but they don't have the experience of being in the classroom. And then that trickles down to it, I think, administration. We need more teachers to become administrators. My administrator at my school, for example, she's a lawyer. She's never taught. She's a lawyer. I don't know how charter schools operate, but they hired her off the strength of that.
That's how they operate.
Okay.
But, she's a lawyer, and she has no sort of, doesn't really know what she's doing in running a school. Mm-hmm. You were at my school last week, and you saw towards the end of the day how chaotic and how hectic it could get. And, I think that if she had more experience in the classroom and more compassion for the teachers, then the school, it would snowball to the students, and it would be better overall. It wouldn't be such a toxic environment at my school with the administration.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, given depending on what type of law she studied, that could either inform or reflect aspects of her personality that now translate into this completely different field of expertise. So, yeah, that's interesting. Do you have anything to add to that, or your own perspective?
Yeah, I have a particular perspective because I'm currently in training to become a mental health counselor, and I want to serve in school settings. But I think something that would really change the way we combat social issues and, issues of trauma in schools is if people took the time to know the difference between a school social worker, a school psychologist, a school licensed counselor, and a school counselor. Like, those are all 4 different jobs that I think that people try to roll into one way too often, especially in the school system. Right. Like, a school will feel like, oh, we have a social worker. Now they don't have a counselor. Or, oh, we have a counselor and a licensed professional counselor, so we don't have a psychologist or a social worker. No, when you're working in a city like Washington, D.C., especially in Ward 8, where there's poverty, there's trauma, there's starvation, there's so many things going on that need to be combated, both inside and outside of the schools, you need a full team, a full mental health team. You need a full social work team to effectively be able to combat the type of issues that we're facing. So having one social worker that serves 3 campuses for one organization, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not even one social worker at each school. At the charter schools that I've worked at, the social worker will serve at all of the campuses for that school organization. So it's ridiculous to think that their caseload is just too much, and the kids are falling between the cracks. And frankly, a lot of the issues are not being addressed.
Balance this out. What if I said, okay, given all the issues the kids are facing generally, what if the schools just took a step back from the actual content of any given class and focused more so on just getting them mentally, emotionally prepared for life, and maybe the actual lesson plans were sort of back burner? Aside from the fact that schools need to be evaluated and meet standards, would that be like an interesting strategy for you guys to say, look, the kids have a lot going on, let's try and teach some math, but the first thing we need to do is make sure they're straight and good so that when they leave here, at least they can function and engage socially?
I think that's good. I think there should be, like, at my school, we had it last year. It was an SEL block, which is social emotional learning, on Wednesdays. So we would take that time and teach some either coping, or we had an hour where they would have the kids do yoga or different kind of things to kind of help them cope. I like to introduce different things in my math lessons that kind of help them out. So I don't know if this answers the question or not, but when when I teach my students in Ward 8, I live in Ward 2. I'm not rich, though.
Where's Ward 2?
It's Logan Circle area.
Oh, okay.
Sort
Okay.
of like by Howard, where it
Whole
costs $1 million to live now. I lived there in the 90s when it definitely wasn't that much.
Yeah, it really was.
So what I try to do is teach my students that you can dictate to your circumstances and make it in spite of your circumstances through my lessons. I don't, I still teach standards, but, a big project that I did last year with them was we talked about gentrification, allocation of resources between Ward 3, which is probably the most wealthiest ward in D.C., and Ward 8, and kind of just taught them how, you can make it in spite of your circumstances.
Wait.
But,
I'm sorry, you're a math teacher.
Yeah.
6th grade?
well, I taught 6th last year. I did this with them last year.
Can you explain this project? What you talking about gentrification as a math teacher with 6th graders?
I was thinking that,
I'm
like,
really curious.
I
What
didn't
is
know
this?
about
We
this.
were doing unit rates, ratios, and percents. And I had talked to my instructional coach. I don't know if I can give her a shout out, but Miss Shantae Fontroy, she hired me. So
Go girl.
I love
Okay.
her to death. She's black girl magic all the way. And I went up to her and I just said, these standards, I said, can you let me teach it the way that I can and help them to understand it and teach life through math? I said, and if you can let me teach it, they will be able to learn it. And if they don't, then hey, I tried. So when we did that, I just had a thought in my head. I said, well, I'll just make the project about DC because it's rapidly changing. So when we did percents, I did percent increase. So we looked at the rent costs from the 90s to now. And I would show them how to do percent increase with mathematical formulas. We did unit rates. We compared. I think it was teenage centers. So like in Ward 3 and Ward 2, you have teenage centers everywhere. And in Ward 8, you have probably like 3. We compared food deserts. So how come there is where I live at now, there's a Harris Teeter, there's a Whole Foods, there's a Giant, and everything else organic on every single block. But where I teach at, there's a Popeyes. The healthiest thing around there is MLK Deli. Shout out to them. There is,
And they do a lot of good work.
They do a
in the
lot
community.
of good work in the community. They actually fed my students when they painted the mural.
Go ahead.
But we talked about murder rates. We talked about prison rates. And we did all this. It's all public information. I just looked up graphs and, I kind of didn't want to overcomplicate it. So I made everything from scratch. I just looked at the information and made everything. And we looked at juvenile rates. We looked at, like I said, murder rates. We looked at everything else. It encompassed DC and the change that happened. Like I said, we looked at gentrification because it's a big thing that's going on right now and how everybody's getting pushed out. And they see it now because it's starting to hit Ward 8, with the St. East being built, those apartments there, the rent price going up. A lot of families are now getting pushed out of Southeast, which is like the last domain of Chocolate City that we have. And through that, the Washington Informer came and did a piece with my class, and they were able to talk to my students to kind of hear them out and hear their voices, and that was a really good thing to give them that exposure to let them know that in Ward 8, there's still greatness here, and it doesn't matter where you come from. You have the ability to dictate to your circumstances.
Give this man an award,
I was about
somebody.
to say, can we clap?
I mean, because I'm just thinking
That
about.
sounds intense.
I mean, I'm thinking about conversations about. I've seen states or school districts in the headlines recently, like passing financial literacy standards, and I'm just thinking, I'm listening to you, and I'm like, we can probably just do this all at once.
Can you teach me? Can I get that
Oh,
class?
I did that too. When we did
I need that.
when we did expressions, for example, I was giving them how to calculate interest rates. Because the formulas are really basic. I don't want to sound like a math professor or math guru, but they're really basic. You just input the numbers. So I taught them how to calculate interest rates. We did a balance and checkbook activity because I want them to know. They always ask me, we did integers, so like negative and positives, withdrawals,
Goodness.
deposits,
See.
balancing the checkbook.
You
'Cause
come up with this?
Yeah, I come up with everything on my own. So, I just believe they always ask me, and I love when they ask me this question, how will this help me in life? Well, and that's
my
why I
God.
have these
Brilliant.
creative
Help
things.
them in life and teach them at the same time.
Yep.
Wow.
They're like,
That-
where will I
instead
use
of
this
having-
again? I'll be like,
right.
okay, well, here you go.
Instead
shook.
of having two battles,
Yep.
learn the math And
So I
why do
always end it with the
man.
project. Every unit is
Wow.
always circled around the project.
Okay.
I would be so happy to be in your class, but I feel like I would also be so scared to be in your class. Like, we're going to learn what?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
always, it's something, yeah.
And it's
Wow.
happening.
Here I
So-
am teaching kids how to count on their fingers.
Well, 2nd grade, 6th grade, different.
You help me
So,
out, because when they get to
I
me,
got
then they
you.
know.
Anything parting on your mind, Jay Callie? Any last questions, unresolved issues, ideas?
I want to just kind of touch on the question that you originally asked about,
The institutional
Yeah.
changes. Yeah.
yeah, and just emotional management. Because you said, y'all, what was it called?
Socio-emotional learning.
Yeah, I think that would be a really great idea to implement. Like, schools are very afraid to put learning and to put academics on the back burner, because I think that's what you said a little while earlier.
right.
I think that it's a beautiful idea. I don't know realistically how would that look in Washington, D.C. schools, because everybody's under a lot of pressure and a lot of
Right.
stress.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like the principal is just like, I need test scores. No, there's someone on top of the principal. There's someone on top of that person who is like, show me the numbers or you're not getting funded. Show me the
Exactly.
numbers or those kids are going to have to go. So if
Right,
you really
right.
care about the kids and you think that you're going to do the best for them, you want to keep them. So you kind of have to follow some rules, even though they're ridiculous. And the best way to change it is to really get into policy and be like, nah, this isn't what's going to happen. Because like he said, we need a lot more educators in policy. We need a lot more educators in those leadership roles who are making the decisions about what that looks like, because the kids do need emotional learning and not 5 minutes a day of teaching a new breathing strategy. But like,
Yeah.
we really, we got to get to the root of the emotional and mental health issues in order to effectively teach these kids and prepare them for college or trades or wherever you aspire to have your children go.
Okay. This was awesome. We've gone like twice as long as we were aiming for, but I mean, there was nowhere I could stop it that I would have felt comfortable, because this was really, really some amazing conversation here. So, Brandon Fry,
Thank you for
6th
having
grade
me.
math and
Computer science.
teacher in DC, born and raised. He's doing a thing. Look for him to maybe be Secretary of Education in the future.
I'm
one
looking out
day.
for that.
Thank you, God willing.
And Jay Callie, of course, thank you for your contribution and your experience to this conversation.
I'm here every week. Anyway, no, you when you first said I lost my voice, do you hear me?
No.
Stop telling me I don't have a lisp. I do.
No. We'll let the viewers decide. Listeners, if you think she has a lisp, send us $5 on Cash App. If you don't think she has a lisp,
Send us $10 on
$10
Cash
on
App.
Cash App. That's the only way we'll be able to tell who voted what.
There's no other poll.
What's good, everybody? Steve Discourse. But okay, seriously, if you've been learning something over the time you've been listening to What's the Deal podcast, we'd appreciate your support. Throw us a couple bucks. We need help covering costs for hosting and for editing and producing and recording these podcasts. You can reach out to us and support in 2 ways. Hit us up on Cash App. And yeah, some of you, that sounds weird. I know, I get it, but this is the way to do things. They do Cash App. Cash App me for my birthday. Cash App me because I'm in a bad mood. Cash App me because I'm doing a great podcast. You can hit Cash App and Venmo at WTD Pod. And you can also hit us at patreon.com/what's the deal. So just keep that in mind as you're listening. Thanks.
All right, what's good, everybody? We're back. I'm Steve Discourse.
It's Jay Callie.
As promised, we got our amazing guest in the building, Jasmine Fassett.
Yes, Jasmine Fassett has a master's in developmental psychology and a psychology specialist degree in school psychology. You know what? I'm really curious. What exactly does that mean?
What it really comes down to is how a school district or a school chooses to utilize that school psychologist. So your grad school program can consist of a lot of different areas where you're trained in, and no grad school program is alike. So you may see a lot of data collection, assessment, just consultation, mental health interventions, academic and learning interventions, behavior interventions, special education services, crisis intervention or prevention, or even postvention. It's just a long list. Family and community connection. So right now, I teeter between I have a caseload of students who either receive special education services or receive services on a 504, and they have behavior support services. So I do a lot of counseling with whatever goals that they may have, whether it's trying to focus, processing difficulties. It's a range of things that I may just help them with. And then also the testing piece. Luckily for me, I'm only in one building. So I don't have to travel around, and I really get to know my kids and spend time with them. But that's not usually the case.
One building meaning just one school?
Just one school.
So other psychologists have multiple schools.
Have multiple schools.
Yes.
A lot of psychologists, they may have 2, sometimes 3 schools that they travel in between throughout the week. And most of the things that they do is just testing. That's it. Because they have so many schools that they have to hit within that week, and they're just cranking out these reports. You have a time frame that you have to get it done. Between as soon as you get the permission from the parent, you have to get your testing done, the report written, and the meeting done within a certain time frame, so they don't always have the opportunity to do the counseling or just spend time with getting to know that school environment fully and become fully intertwined in the school environment.
So some psychologists, you're saying, are running around just spending most of their time emphasized on executing these tests.
Yeah.
But you have an opportunity to do some other work as far as developing relationships with the students. Can you just dive into that a little bit and the pros and cons?
I think it comes down to what your interests are and what you want to do. For me, when I was in grad school, I was like, I want to be school-based. Like, I only want one school. And the pro for me is that my students know exactly who I am. It's no question of who Miss Facet is. They know where to find me. They know if I'm working late that day. You just really build these very strong relationships with the students and with the teachers because they see you every single day and you become reliable. And that has made my job so much easier, just having the time building those relationships. This is my 3rd year at the school that I'm at now. And that now just being my 3rd year, I don't get as much pushback or like, who is this person in my classroom? Right. It's just like, hey, Miss Fancy, how you doing? Sit in.
So earlier, I want to throw it back to the testing piece. You talked about, so it's kind of like 2 questions I want to ask. Okay. One, can you break down what is an IEP for like the listeners and for the people who may not know? And then what are some of the other purposes behind all of the testing that school psychologists do?
Okay, so IEP is an individualized education plan, and this is from IDEA. It's a federal law. Basically, I look at it as a legal document that is helping break down what this kid is struggling with and what supports are we putting in place, what goals are we setting to help them reach. And overall, that's the way I view it, is like they have struggles. What are we about to do? And this is a legal document, and y'all have to follow every single thing that is in this document, whether it's accommodations, whether it's like the student may need extra time for something, or it's certain materials that they need to help them. Is really to put them in a place where they can continue to progress academically within the general education population. So if a student has an IEP, you're basically saying without any supports, they will fail. They cannot be successful in the general education population. So this is what we're looking at, and this is what we need to do to help support. And what was your second question about testing? I'm sorry.
What is like the purpose behind all of the other psychological tests that you might be performing?
So that can help feed and determine what the goals may be. So if a student is really weak in the math area, you can determine, what goals that you may need to set for math. That's just an example. It also can help with determining how they're going to qualify. So there's 13 different categories that you can qualify for special education under. I can't remember every single one off the top of my head, but that helps to feed the information. And you're not supposed to just determine based off of just testing. It's supposed to just be background information, testing, teacher reports, you're supposed to bring a whole lot of information to the table and be able to determine what what supports this student needs, what qualifications, what disability category they will fall under. And it's usually you got to check off the list. It's like if they don't meet one of the qualifications, then they won't qualify under that disability.
Yeah.
So that's really, it's just a component. It's not supposed to be the main part that determines if a student receives an IEP or not. It's just part of the process. Yeah.
So what role does the school psychologist play when it comes to like diagnosing students with mental health issues, or other than educational disabilities? Like what about social, emotional, or mental health disabilities?
A lot of disabilities you may see can happen from a clinical psychologist. So it's definitely a difference. I can't diagnose. You okay?
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I can't diagnose someone with schizophrenia. That's not, for example, that's not in my training. I may be able to say I have noticed symptoms of certain things, or these are the characteristics I have seen, but I don't have the credentials, the licensing, the training to say that they have certain disabilities.
Is that something that certain schools may look for in a school psychologist, or is that because you say some schools have different criteria and training that they're looking for?
Most schools, if you truly understand the job that you're posting, you should know that that's not something that falls under a school psychologist.
So that okay, yeah. I see.
So I'm not necessarily diagnosing for those type of for like bipolar or anything like that. That is definitely out of my lane, and I'm very good at staying in my lane. And that's something like when you're like a NAS member and all those things, like they're very strict on like whatever your expertise is, that's what you work under that. You don't, and if you need more training and things like that, or you become credentialed in things. So if I know that is something that is like way, that's above me, or that I will not pretend or anything, like I'm not stepping into that lane, and we need to bring in someone who has the right credentials and training in that.
That was actually going to be one of the things I asked you about, because I don't think a lot of people always recognize the differences between a psychologist, a school psychologist, a school counselor, a clinical mental health counselor who is school-based, especially sometimes leaders inside of school buildings, because they might hire one, like, oh, you can just do all of these things, right?
No.
But they're totally different jobs.
Yeah, everyone is so different. Sometimes when people they hear psychologist, they're like, oh, you must do, they just run down a list. You do all these things. I'm like, wait, hold up. First of all, I'm credentialed to work with pre-K through 12. Let's start there. I don't work with adults. So that's one of the biggest things. But, the difference that I see, like with a school counselor, school social worker, they're not doing the testing. That's one of the biggest things, because you have to be really trained into doing that and be, have the credentials to do that. My training looks different than what a social worker
might be trained to do.
They might, because, and like I said, every program may be different. So some programs may put a little bit more emphasis on counseling. Some programs may be like, we test, like this is what we do. You're going to be the best tester out there.
Yes.
So every program looks different. So I do work with social workers, and just their background and their knowledge that they have with like mental health and counseling, and the toolbox that they have is like impressive to me. And I enjoy talking to them, and even though I'm like a school psychologist, like I said, it's so broad, so you have a lot of different things that you're learning, and I'm learning from them, but our backgrounds and our training is completely different.
So I kind of just want to say this just to offer a little bit more clarity. Like, the biggest piece is the difference between being a school psychologist or being a school counselor or being a school social worker, which is a very specific job where you're trained to work inside of a school, and really that's it.
Yes.
Versus being a clinical psychologist, a clinical social worker, or a clinical counselor who has the option to be school-based.
Yeah,
which means you are trained to diagnose, you're trained to be a clinician, you can work with adults, you can work with children, but if you prefer to only work in a school setting, you can, but if you choose to work outside of a school setting, you have the certifications to do that. And within the school system, if you are a licensed clinician, you do have the ability to diagnose with bipolar, with schizophrenia, with whatever mental health needs those students have, and to counsel them through it. And that's just the biggest difference.
Yeah. Okay. And a lot of people they just see the title and they
Yeah.
just assume that you do it all.
Right. So they either see psychologist and they assume that you're a clinician, or they see
Right.
that you work in a school, and some people might say, "Oh, so you're a school counselor."
Right.
It's like,
And
no, it's one or it's the other. They're not the same.
Right.
So, what are the challenges that students are facing that the rest of us out there, parents or just people in the community, should be aware of that maybe we don't understand is an obstacle for kids succeeding in school?
So there's a number of different things that I realized, and maybe I saw it as a student. I didn't pay much attention to it, and as an adult, I pay a lot more attention. I'm just more sensitive and more aware of things. One of the things is just I guess you can call it like the competition between one another, just trying to impress, like that pressure of trying to be as good as their peers, whether it's what you have on, whether it's academically. It's a lot. Sometimes the kids feel a lot of pressure because they see how successful someone else may be or what they have, and that can cause some insecurity within them. And we may just be like, man, just suck it up. But it's not that easy to just suck it up. Bullying is something that is an overused term because it becomes that everyone is bullied. Like, sometimes kids, they tease each other, but they're like going back and forth. It's like they think it's funny. They're jabbing at each other back and forth. And I'm not, necessarily condoning that, but I think everything isn't bullying. It has to be some type of power difference, between the two people. But it does happen, though, and I do see it, and I have to step back and like you're the adult, like you can't pop off on a kid. But if I've always been that person. If I saw someone who couldn't handle something for themselves, like just ready to step in, like what you not gonna do, like that is like not Miss Faster, like that's Jasmine, like I'm ready,
Right.
But I have seen my students who they appear a certain way, so they become easier targets, and that can go really bad. If that student doesn't have like a certain support system or adults within the building that they trust, or even like as long as they don't feel isolated within their friend group, it can go bad. So those are some of the things. Those are two things that I noticed that our students are really, struggling with. And then when something is going on outside of school, we have to remember our kids carry that load with them wherever they go. So as professionals working in the school, we have to be very understanding. So to me, it's so important to get to know our students. And it doesn't mean I'm all up in your business. I need to know every single thing you did this weekend. I got to make sure you're good. It's not like that, but just a natural relationship building. So you can develop just some compassion and understanding of what they may be going through, and not just assume because they acting out like they're just a bad kid, or where they IEP at. It's not always that. Is we all have things that we go through, and the hope is that we just learning these skills that we develop these skills to be able to deal with it. But a 9-year-old may not quite have it yet.
So what kind of support is still lacking? Give us a sense of where you think the needs lie.
Well, for first, there's just a shortage in school psychologists. And so it's not that many as it need to be. Like there's always there's always a need for us, because legally you need someone to be able to do this work, or you're going to have a whole lot of issues on your hand if you have someone who's not credentialed testing a student. It's not going to go well for you, and you'll lose that case. It's not, but there's a shortage. So there's always a job somewhere. Someone is always looking for a school psychologist. I remember seeing a job posting for like U.S. Virgin Islands, what? And I thought about it. I was like, but I love my family. I wasn't ready to leave my nephews, but is always a job, but it's not enough school psychologists to fulfill that. Ideally for me, I would love for like every school to have just one school psychologist.
Yes.
I would love that. I know 9 times out of 10 that's not going to happen. So you're like constantly trying to get people interested into the profession and explaining the need of them, because it can be a really quick burnout. You know, sometimes school psychologists, they get to 5 years and they're like, I'm done.
Oh,
So-
God, yes.
So earlier you mentioned some psychologists are going across from 2, 3, 4 schools at a time. Is that a function of like a lack of budget, or not enough psychologists, or maybe administrators think this is all we need them for, so we're just hiring for that limited capacity?
I think it might be a combination of all those things. I
Okay.
think, you know, we want to get paid. Let's like, you know, we want to get paid, and I'll backtrack. I don't do what I do just because, you know, of the money. I tell students, I was like, trust me, I don't get paid as much as you think I do. But you also want, you want your worth. You know what you're worth, and you want to get paid
Absolutely.
what you're worth, which is okay. But sometimes budget does come into play. Sometimes it's just not enough. So it's like, listen, you're going to be here. You're going to have to suck it up for these 2 schools, you know, like I need you to do it. And I think administrators don't fully understand the importance of, not all administrators, I think some administrators don't fully understand the importance of school psychologists and why we need them. I feel that way even when it goes down to like the professional development, like during the school day. When you have professional development in the schools, 9 times out of 10 is not geared towards what the school psychologists need. You have to kind of go outside of what's happening in your school, but they always have stuff for the teachers. They kind of have an understanding, because a lot of times the principal was a teacher, or you know, they know they have an understanding, but they don't always know what the school psychologist needs. So it takes you going up to people like, hey, I need this type of training so I can stay credentialed, or I can, you know, all of that. But I just think it's it's a combination of things why, you know, a school psychologist may have, you know, more than one school.
Let's finish this way. Why do you love your job? What do you love most about it? And what are some administrators maybe not understanding that you're really bringing to the table?
Why do I love? You know, I always knew like I was going to work with children. It was just no doubt in my mind that that's what I was going to. I have just so much passion and so much joy. It was just determining how was I going to do it. And there's so many different things you can do. So I was thinking like, all right, come on, you done graduated undergrad, like, you know, you want to work with children, but what really are you going to do? So I had to reflect back on my life and how I was as a student, specifically in elementary and middle school, and I was terrible to say the least. I wasn't the best behaviorally. I was that student who did well academically, but kind of ticked people off because I was, you know, acting up, you know, with certain teachers. But there were people who really believed in me and like sold into me however I needed, and kind of propelled me to do well. So I thought about, I'm like, I'm gonna work in the school. Like, I want to be a person who makes a difference, but can be a low-key difference. Like, I don't need to be recognized or anything like that, but who's going to be there to be helpful and like bring a different thing to the table, understanding like why someone may be struggling behaviorally, what is going on, why someone is struggling academically. And every day is not a successful day for me, but sometimes a kid will come into my office and they'll be like, Miss Fassett, I got that 3.5 because we did boom, boom, boom. And like, I've been wanting to cry on the inside. Right. It feels so good. Or a parent that will say, like, Ms. Fassett, thank you for being so consistent with my kid. I know they have been struggling behaviorally. I know how they've been struggling academically. You've been rocking with them for 3 years and you've been very consistent with them. That feels good. You know, and so when I get frustrated I can't figure out how to help this kid because I get stumped, I always have those little things in my back pocket that reminds me why I do what I do, why I enjoy what I do. And there's always a light somewhere. I mean, it may be a little dark for like a week or two, but at some point it's going to be a bright spot, and it's going to be something that reminds you that you're here for the kids, you're an advocate for the kids, and you love, as much as they may frustrate you, you absolutely love them, and you love being a support for them.
Wow.
Awesome.
I really love letting educators and people who work within schools come into the studio and talk to us about this stuff, because it really ignites my flame. Like, yeah, that's true. Like, that's really how it feels to be around children. Like, that's exactly it. Like, I feel, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this was awesome. Jasmine Fassett, thank you for coming in.
No problem at all.
Can we get to it? What am I saying?
So basically, we need to record a quick message telling listeners what we want to do. We got a lot of plans that we want to roll out. We want to upgrade the show a little bit, make it a little bit bigger, better. We want to upgrade our social media presence a little bit, and that we need to raise some funds for this.
Okay, I got it. Here we go. What's good, everybody? It's your girl, Jay Callie, coming to beg and plead with you to send us a little bit of cash, a little bit of dough, a little bit of green, guap, moolah. You know what we're talking about. Please, we need your support to keep the show going, to keep the show amazing. If you would like to send us financial payments, you can send it to us through Cash App. Our Cash App and Venmo have the same handle, WTD Pod. If you are so gracious, if you would like to send us monthly, what is it called? Automated payments, you can hit us up on Patreon at www.patreon.com/what's the deal. You can send us 5 cents a month, $5 a month, $500 a month. It depends on your pockets, and I am not counting yours. You know what you have, and you know what you can give. We appreciate ya. Thank you.